Welcome to Rewiring the American Edge, the podcast where we explore the intersection of innovation, automation, and policy to ask one big question. What will it take for cities, industries, and people to thrive in a rapidly changing world? I'm Billy Riggs, urban planner, researcher, and technologist. And with my co-host, Vipul Vias, we talk with global thinkers, policy leaders, entrepreneurs, and many more to explore how to build more competitive, inclusive, and resilient economies in the U.S. and around the world. Join us. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Rewiring the American Edge. I'm Billy Riggs. In this show, we think about how we can rewire the future of the American economy with entrepreneurship, innovation, focusing on everything related to automation in the future. We're a spinoff of the Autonomous Vehicles and the City Initiative at the University of San Francisco. Today, I'm joined not only by my co-host, Vipul Bias, but next to me, I have special guest, Lee Riggs, part of the future of the economy of the United States. Lee, you want to introduce yourself?
I'm Lee Riggs. Is there anything else to say? I'm your son.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So thanks for introducing you. Want to tell anything else about yourself? Lee is how old?
I'm 12. Yeah.
All right. Thanks, Lee. All right. So Lee is 12 and he actually really wanted to join us today. And today we're going to talk a little bit about outpacing the chaos, and something we've been chewing on for a while about how we keep moving forward and how we keep innovating and how we harness the benefits of automation, innovation in the future. And I think it's something that over the past couple months we've seen when our politics kind of seem stuck and reversed. Vipul, hi, what's going on? Hey, what's up? Go for it.
I'm not sure if I have a lot to say about chaos. I think uncertainty's always been around in different forms forever, and I think we've actually been through an bizarrely certain period of time, or certain era of certainty, I guess is a better way of putting it, for the last 30 plus years, maybe even more than that. And we're coming out of something that we're familiar with, and so it feels particularly precarious. But that's normal. These cycles kind of happen, and we're leaving one period and entering another. And I think what is dangerous is just settling into admiring the problem, going, yeah, it's chaotic, it's uncertain, versus planning and preparing for that uncertainty. I think what you have to almost acknowledge is that it will be a period of uncertainty and of chaos, and all the assumptions that we've held on to and we've assumed, not to be redundant, were grounded in bedrock, aren't really that way anymore. That's not the case. And so we have to revisit a lot of assumptions. It's been really easy to do business in many respects of just being able to come up with an idea, whether it's software or physical goods, and get it produced overseas, cheaply with outsourced labor or outsourced manufacturing, so we could innovate very quickly. Mm-hmm. There was a rhythm to the world's design studio was America, or at least to some extent, we played a role in that capacity. And then the workshops were either, parts of Eastern Europe, India, Southeast Asia, et cetera, for software. And then for physical goods, it was China, parts of Southeast Asia again, and you got stuff made. And there was this sort of ecosystem that developed. And I think all of that is being revisited, and new ecosystems will have to emerge.
Yeah, and I think that's right. Just let me ask Lee something too. I mean, how are you seeing, like, when you go to school and every day in school, how are you seeing technology change? Like when you're in your classroom, are you seeing AI, and are you seeing technology used more in your elementary school classroom? And actually, you're in middle school now. Are you seeing technology used more than when you were in elementary school?
Well, obviously in COVID, technology became more of a normal thing in schools. So like now everybody, I don't know how to explain this. They're kind of more, a lot of more things are done online. Like there are these programs that teachers will say, okay, do that. And that's kind of a big portion of your education. Now, obviously, there are bad parts, or I wouldn't say bad parts, but there's AI, right, which can be used in good ways, like for students that don't speak your language, or for just helping in general. And it also, again, has, in my opinion, it has a lot of bad parts of it too. Like students could be using it to cheat. But I think technology has been having a mostly positive effect on education in general, as it does give teachers more time to actually focus on the students.
Yeah, a lot more tools in the toolbox.
Yeah.
And I think we'll come back to this idea of what does technology, innovation, automation mean for education. But I think I want to agree with both of you because I think it's a really big context setting. And I would say when we think about, gridlock in Congress, regulatory uncertainty, global trends, global tensions, what we talked about with regard to guarding the gates, you would think it's a terrible time to be building the future, to be building resiliency, to be preparing your city for the next boom. And I think we have to think about how our systems evolving, and because they are evolving quietly and powerfully. And the question is, how and what should we be doing? And how can cities, whether or not you're in the US, whether or not you're in Europe, whether or not you're in Asia, how do you keep that competitive edge? How do you not be the complacent city, as you've described over numerous episodes, Vipul? And because I would say, and maybe our theme here is, innovation ain't waiting for you. Innovation ain't going to wait for you. The train is moving, and don't you lay on the tracks.
Yeah.
Vipul?
Yeah, I think the key is that a lot of cities, a lot of state and local governments are viewing the world as business as usual, where you see a lot of, at least, grappling with the uncertainties happening at the national level, because that's, a lot of the things have national implications. I'm not saying the state and local governments are completely, ignoring this, but they are more so than they should be. At the national level, that foreign policy is changing, trade policy is changing. There's national level legislation happening that's going to impact everyone, including state and local governments. But state and local governments aren't affecting that change. They're not making that change, as is the case at the federal level. Responding to it, and to some extent, they are being buoyed about by it. And so their initial response is to, go to court, try to stop the change from happening, essentially kind of put their head in the sand a little bit about the fact that things are changing. Their funding sources may be impacted. Their economies may be impacted by the industries that really contribute to their vibrancy. And so instead of going, okay, well, what's happening at the national level? I think people view it as a sort of a fluke. And it depends on how you look at the Trump administration in general. If you look at the Trump administration as a symptom of inevitable change, meaning maybe it's chaotic, maybe it's dramatic, maybe it's happening in ways that don't seem to be very elegant, but is it just a function of this is going to happen, and this is just the administration that is now victim of, or just doing it because it was going to happen no matter who was in power? And if you believe that, then you should be preparing. You should be like, okay, this may not be the most elegant way of this change to come about, but it's going to happen sooner or later, and might as well figure out how to live in this new world. But I think a lot of people are saying, well, the current administration is the driver and function of the change. It's not that change was inevitably needed. It's that this administration was forcing something that didn't otherwise have to happen. And the preference there is to say, well, this is temporary. This is a function of who's in power, and we just have to sit tight or try to fight back and roll it back to the extent we can. And if you're in the latter camp, those may be a fair conclusion to come to. If you're in that latter camp, you're not going to probably be focused on preparing for a future. You're going to be focused on preserving what is. Not even that you intend to, but because that's your mindset. You're going, chaos is a function of this person in power or this administration, and therefore I have to fight that, versus go, Well, this administration is basically just a hallmark or a symptom of changes that are afoot. And so those changes are going to happen no matter who's there. Maybe it would have been executed better or worse, who knows, but they're going to happen, and therefore have to get ready for it and prepare for it. And I think the people that are in that camp, though, prepare for it because it's inevitable, may be better served, because if things go back to the way they were, you're fine. You know how to operate in that world. If they don't, you've done nothing to prepare for a new world where the rules have changed. You haven't bothered to get ready. So there's no downside in being more prepared for the perceived set of changes that are coming down the pipe than to just sort of assume that this is a temporary blip. It's a long way of saying it's better to proactively think about how to navigate what may be durable uncertainties or durable changes than presume that the status quo is what we're going to drift back to at some point anyway.
And crisis or chaos can be a good option, spark for action. And, I think, if you look back to the Cold War and how the Cold War perhaps generated the chaos that spurred advanced manufacturing, that then drove the innovation that then sparked innovations that generated GPS, the R&D urgency that then drove a lot of the technology that's in our cell phones. In the 2008 recession, a lot of the clean tech scaled under crisis pressure that then scaled the solar industry. Of course, some of that has retracted in recent years. But I mean, I think despite the dysfunction, one of the things that I take hope in is a lot of the stuff that we've talked about in past episodes is you can have decentralized innovation that happens even when you have centralized chaos. And I think you can have a lot of this decentralized innovation that is still focused on acute societal problems and is still acutely trying to address some of these acute issues despite some of the noise and the narrative that's happening while waiting for, let's just face it, DC to get its act together.
Yep. I think that's what you have to spend time analyzing. And it's a worthwhile analysis to undertake, which is, as I said before, are these changes that are going to be inevitably coming along, or are these temporary vacillations of the preferences of whoever's in power? An example of that is, are we going to be able to run structural deficits for a long time? And if we determine that's not possible, we've hit some sort of debt maxima, then you can start to assume the federal government will retrench the amount of money it sends back to state and local governments, and you should prepare for that. If you think the federal government is retreating from its role in healthcare, especially on the side of Medicaid, for example, with very massive cuts, etc., and the Medicaid is a program that's a mixture of state and local, of state and federal contribution, then you're going to probably expect to have to pony up more. And so how do you get ready for that? Infrastructure. If the federal government's going to be spending less money, giving you less money for roads, road projects, bridges, transportation in general, then what are you going to do about that? Like, how do you plan for that? So those are examples of, do you think these are going to be trans administration or, above the current administration's policy choices, or are they reflecting things that are going to happen for the long term?
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think anyone sat down and thought about that in any deep way.
No, I don't think people are thinking longitudinally or over time. But I have a question about that, because I think that gets at really this bigger longitudinal. Are we doing long-term thinking? But I want to turn it over here to the young one. Young one, lean in so we can see your beautiful face. Young one, what do you think of all this? What do you think of these two old men here shooting the breeze?
I really think it all depends on how everybody, especially these big leaders, you put it, or how I'd put it, see the word change, sort of. You could see it as this horrible, I don't want to say it, natural disaster that comes away and just takes everything you knew the way it was or you could kind of lean in and accept it. And I personally don't think that it's bad in any way. Like, sure, AI might, as some people think, take away a lot of jobs, but I'm sure it'll also open up plenty of new ones too. Like, now you look, I don't know if anybody's noticed this, but a lot of the time when you drive and you see all these billboards, they're mostly AI ads. I don't know. I feel like it's not all gonna be bad.
Yeah, and to cite a fact from one of our, I think our last episodes with Ruth Whitaker, you didn't listen to this, but we had a stat that every automated vehicles deployed was estimated to create 190 new jobs, which was not just engineers, it was operational jobs, diagnostic jobs, fleet management jobs. It was, as Vipul put it, it was a lot of atoms, not just electrons. I loved that quote, Vipul. More atoms than electrons. Physical jobs, back of house economy, not only flashy, but stable middle class work. Right, Vip?
Yeah. I mean, the white collar jobs that we have today are mostly about conceiving things and managing those newly conceived things. And there's a lot of overhead involved with that. So it's not a design related. So ultimately, it's design related, whether people, sort of grasp that or not. That's essentially what's happening. So you're creating some new idea and then you're commercializing it and maintaining the commercialization of that thing. So if you invent new software, you're figuring out how to come up with it, how to design it, how to produce it, how to get it out in the market, and how to then commercialize it in terms of monetize it and make money. And there's a whole lot of effort associated with that. And then the part that is physical creation, design, and bringing something to life that's physical, the design may happen here, even the commercialization, monetization may happen here, but the actual atoms part happens overseas. So
Mm-hmm.
the question is, does that come back? Does it go somewhere else in the world, or do we find it closer to home? And I don't know. We'll see. But
Yeah.
if we are changing parts of our economy, the physical built environment and what's in that built environment, that's going to mean new people doing new things to keep that built environment working. And that's where those sort of atom-oriented jobs will become more relevant.
Well, and I think as we think about the future of education, it's important that as we think about particularly some of the jobs that middle income jobs, and for some of your friends that don't plan to go to college, if you were to not want to go to college, you think about which, you can do whatever you want. You're a very smart boy, but if you wanted to do something different, you have to think about, making stuff, and you have to think about like electrical circuits and building stuff. And I think that's one of the things that we really have to rethink. It's not just about everybody can't just be a programmer anymore, because that's going to be done by algorithms, and there's going to be a lot of unemployed computer programmers in the future, because that's going to be done by AI. And there's going to be a lot of lawyers that are going to be unemployed in the future. There's going to be a lot of people in marketing that are unemployed in the future. And we do have to think about a lot of these jobs that pivot over to people that transition to other areas. And I do think this maker space is an important area to think about.
Yeah, that's a whole subject in itself.
Yeah, it's something we haven't even scratched the surface on, but I do think it hits on this space where, and this tension that where you were going about how innovation is just moving so fast, and there's all this political tension and chaos and no resolution, and at the end of the day, politics is not policy. And so what does that mean? Policy is not keeping up. And how do we resolve that?
Yeah, we'll have to see. That's the question.
Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah, I don't
Yeah,
know.
and I hope we can get, in the coming weeks, I hope we can get Marcy Harris on here. We've been talking with her about getting her on. There's, I think, some well-meaning, slow federal initiatives about AI. There's been some well-meaning dialogues about autonomous vehicles, but we really don't have cohesive forward-looking governance about the future of work.
Yep.
And maybe even about the future of cities. And that's where I think that people like, we've talked a little bit about, people like Matt Mahan, people like Michelle Wu from Boston. We've got some strong mayors in the US that are kind of putting stakes in the ground as being, I would think, bottom up leaders. And I think some leaders in Europe at the national level putting some industrial strategies out there, and China maybe doing some national level strategies. But I think we can't expect at the US the market to just figure it out. We have to have some longitudinal goals, and we don't have that right now.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, I don't think there's a lot of there's goal setting. I think we talked about before. That's very short term oriented. That's around, what's the best way to put it? It's around solving the problems that most places would have assumed are already solved. It's sort of self created own goals like safety, cleanliness of streets, things of that nature. Very basic civic governance functions that are being tackled and solved, and they are tied up in a quagmire just getting those done. So no one has the energy, time, and space to think about the future because they're trying to solve the basics. And that's really the dilemma right now. I mean, that's the core issue.
Okay. Well, I think that's all I got for this dialogue, Vipul. I mean, I think my message is, I think automation, it's not a job killer. It's a growth engine. The future is being built, and it's not because of government. It's because of local resolve, private capital, and the urgency of the technical. And but we got to be smarter, and we got to get policymakers engaged with clear national intent to keep up with the rest of the world, and not just have fragmented local leadership on this issue.
I agree. I totally agree. I think that makes a ton of sense.
Do you have any final word for us, Lee, today?
I actually have a question.
Yes, sir.
Do you think with all these new innovations, would you call it innovation?
Innovations.
Okay, you had a word for it. Do you think that people like my age who are growing up and thinking, what do I want to be when I grow older, should take this into mind and say, well, that might not be a thing because AI will have taken it? Like, is that something that I, as someone who is growing up and thinking about what he might want to do in the future, should think about?
Vipul?
Yeah, and the truth is I don't have an answer. I think that the only answer I can kind of come to is knowing AI and being able to use AI as well as possible, as best as anyone can out there, is probably the key to being competitive. Number one is like just not avoiding it, getting immersed in it, being an expert in it. Is You can't go wrong, at least in the short term, in doing that. And the second thing is, I don't know how creative AI will ultimately be. We'll have to see, but that is a space that is more interesting in my mind. Is that how do you how how do you navigate that? How do you cultivate your creativity? How do you get into the habit of producing more things than consuming things? Even if that's just cooking, that's producing something, that's using your creative side, art, things of that nature. Because AI can probably do, at least for now, and yeah, I can make videos and things that look like movies, but someone has to come up with the idea of what it is that you want AI to do. So I think exercising your creative capabilities so that you can get AI to do what you want, that you would want it to do, is going to be the difference.
You always have to have the prompt.
Yeah, you have to have
And
someone, this is what I want.
the creativity really is giving it the command.
Yeah.
And it's always like giving the AI the seed, and the place to start, I think, is the real power. So I mean, I would go back to kind of, it's the engine, and you're giving it the key to start the engine. And once that engine gets started, You're giving it the fuel to really power your creative enterprise. And I think it can really enable growth at a level that we've not seen before. And we talked in a prior episode about there's a possibility that we see levels of wealth in our society and levels of prosperity that we've never seen before, but we have to be able to plan to unlock it. And we have to be able to plan to unlock it, not just for the most wealthy, but for people across the economic spectrum, for the most wealthy, the middle class, and the most vulnerable. And that we have to make sure that we take care of everyone in our society. And I think maybe I'll just conclude us for the day with kind of what I said before. That's, it's happening. Innovation is here to stay. Automation is here to stay. And done right, it can be a growth engine. And we just need to rewire with purpose. And the question is, are we going to guide it at the macro level? Or are we just going to just react to it? And we'll keep on talking about that over the next couple of weeks.
And that is the question. That's the question.
Thanks, everybody, for being here. Catch you later. Thanks, Vipul. Thanks, Lee.
Thank you. Take care. See you guys. Bye.
This has been Rewiring the American Edge, global conversations on innovation, automation, and the future of competitive cities. I'm Billy Riggs. Thanks for joining us. Our series is sponsored by the University of San Francisco Automation and Innovation Fund. If you're interested in supporting our students or work, reach out via email. Also, please connect with us on social media or LinkedIn. We would love to hear from you. Until then, all the best.